Chapter 4. Total darkness blotted out the sea. It became cold and damp. Timothy took the shelter down. We both pulled on our shirts and pants back on. They were stiff from the salt, and they felt clammy. The wind picked up, blowing fine chill spray across the raft, and the stars came out. We stayed in the middle of the raft, side by side, as we drifted aimlessly over the sea. Stu Cat rubbed his back against the bottoms of my feet, and then curled up down there. I was glad, because it kept him warm. I was thinking that it was very strange for me, a boy from Virginia, to be lying next to a giant Negro out on the ocean, and I guess Timothy was thinking probably the same thing. Once our bodies touched, we both drew back, but I drew back faster. In Virginia, I knew they'd always lived in their sections of town, and us in ours. A few times I'd gone down through the shacks of the colored town with my father. They sold spicy crabs in one shack, I remembered. I saw them mostly in the summer, down by the river, fishing and swimming naked, but I didn't really know any of them. And in Willemstad, I didn't know them very well either. Henrik van Boven did, though, and he was much easier with them. I asked, "Timothy, where is your home?" "Oh, St. Thomas," he answered. "Charlotte Amalie. In St. Thomas," he added. "'Tis Virginia Island." "Then you're American," I said. I remember from school that we had been taught that the Virginians from Denmark. He laughed. "Oh, I suppose I am, young boss. I never gave it much thought. I sailed back the islands as well as the Venezuela, Colombo, Panama. I just never gave it much thought if I was American." I said, "Your parents were African, Timothy." He laughed, low and soft. "Young boss, you want me to say I true come from Africa?" "You say what you want." It's just Timothy looked very much like the men that I'd seen in the jungle pictures with the flat noses and the heavy lips. He shook his head. "I have no recollection. Any of them except in the islands. 'Tis pure outrageous. I do not remember anything about a place called Africa." I didn't know if he was telling me the truth or not. He looked pure African to me. And I said, "What about your mother?" Now there's deep laughter in his voice. "'Tis even more outrageous. I don't remember my father or mother. I was raised by a woman called Hannah Gooms." "Then you're an orphan," I said. "Well, I guess, young boss, I guess." He was chuckling to himself, rich and deep. I looked over towards him, but again, he was just a shadowy shape of a large mound. "How old are you, Timothy?" I asked. "Oh, that fact is also very mysterious. Little more than 60, 'cause the muscles in my legs be speaking to me and complaining all the time. But to be true, I don't know exactly." I was amazed that any man should not know his own age. I was almost certain now that Timothy had indeed come from Africa, but I didn't tell him that. I said, "Well, I'm almost 12. I wanted him to know that I was almost 12, and he could stop treating me like I was half that age. "Whew, that be a very important age, young boss," Timothy agreed. "Now you mustn't be getting some natural sleep. Tomorrow may be a very long day, and we don't have much to do." I laughed. There we were, bucking on a raft with nothing to do except watch schooners and aircraft. "What do we have to do, Timothy?" I asked. His eyes groped through the darkness and searched for mine, and he came up on his elbows. "Stay alive, young boss. That's what we have to do." Soon it became very cold, and I became shivery. Part of it was the coldness, part of it was also fear. If the raft tipped over, there were sharks, and they would slash at us. I knew that. My head was aching violently again. During the day, the pain had been dull, but now it was just shooting both sides of my head. Once, sometime during the early night, I felt his hand on my forehead, and he shifted my body, placing it on the other side of him. He murmured, "Young boss, the wind has shifted. You be warmer on this side." I was still shivering. Soon he gathered me against him, and Stucat came to be a warm ball on my feet. I could now smell Timothy tucked up against him. He didn't smell like my father or my mother. My father always smelled of bay rum or shaving lotion that he used, and my mother smelled of some kind of perfume or cologne. Timothy smelled different. He smelled strong, like the black men who worked on the decks of the tankers when they were loading. And after a while, I didn't mind the smell because Timothy's back was very warm. And the raft plunged on across the light swells through long out of the day. I don't think I slept much during the night, but I've been told that old people don't sleep much anyways. I woke up, and there was a pale band of light in the east. And Timothy said, "Ah, you've had a while, young boss? How's the head?" "It still hurts," I admitted. Timothy said, "Oh, a crack on the head takes a few days to go away." He opened the trap of the raft and pulled out the water keg and a tin containing some biscuits and the chocolate squares and the dry matches. I sat up, feeling really dizzy. He allowed me half a cup of water and 2 hard biscuits, and then he fed Stu Cat with the wedge of the leftover flying fish we ate in silence, and the light crept steadily over the smooth, oily sea. The wind had died, and already the sun was beginning to scorch. Timothy chewed half on a biscuit. "Today, young boss? I should over the pass. I bettin' de jump on that." "I hope so," I said. "I do think we are not far from Providencia St. Andres." I looked hard at Timothy. "Are those islands?" He nodded. I kept looking at him. It seemed as if there was a film. There was a haze that was separating us. I kept rubbing my eyes and I opened them again, but the haze was still there. I glanced over to a red ball, which is now the sun, now clear in the horizon. It seemed dim, and I said, "I think there's something wrong with my eyes." Timothy said, "I'd warned you. You looked direct at the sun yesterday." Yeah, that was it. I did look at the sun too much. "Today," Timothy said, "do not even look in the water. The glare's too bad." He went out about setting some triangles up for our tent, and I took off my clothes, and he draped them, pants and shirt, and I got under the shelter. The pain in my head was almost unbearable now. I remember moaning. Timothy tore off a piece of his shirt from the shelter roof and soaked it in fresh water and placed it over my eyes. There was worry in his voice when he talked. A while later, I took the cloth off my eyes, and I looked up. The inside of our shelter was shadowy and dark, but the pain had begun to go away. "It doesn't hurt as much anymore," I said. "Ah, see, it's just taking some time, young boss." So I put the cool cloth back on my eyes and went to sleep again. When I woke up, it was night, yet the air felt hot. In the breeze that came across the raft, I was warm, and I lay there thinking, "What time is it?" I asked. "Oh, about 10. "At night?" There was puzzlement in his voice. "'Tis day, 'tis day." I put my hand in front of my face. Even in very blackest night, you can see your own hand. But I could not see mine, and I screamed, "Timothy, I'm blind! I'm blind!" "What?" His voice frightened with a roar. Then I knew that he was bending over me, and I felt his breath in my face. "Young boss, you cannot be blind." He pulled me roughly from the shelter. "Look at the sun," he ordered, his hands pointing my face. I felt a strong warmth against it, but everything was black. The silence seemed to last forever as he held my face towards the sun. Then a long, shuddering sigh came from his great body, and he gently said, "Now, young boss, you mustn't lie down and rest. And you, as happen, will go away. 'Tis natural and temporary." But his voice was hollow. I got down on my hot boards, blinking my eyes again and again, trying to lift the curtain of blackness. I touched them. They didn't feel any different. When I realized the pain in my head, it had gone away, but it left me blind. I could hear my voice saying far off, "I don't feel any pain, Timothy. The pain is gone." I guess he was trying to think about it all. In a few minutes he murmured, "Once, over about Barbados, a man had an arthritis crack on the head and be sailing the boom shift. This man was blind too. 3 whole days he saw nothing but night. Then true, it went away." "Do you think that will happen to me?" "I think that be true, young boss," he said. Then he became very quiet. After a moment, lying in the darkness, hearing the creak of the raft and feeling its motion, it all hit me. I was blind, and we were lost at sea. I began to crawl, screaming for my mother and my father, and I felt his hard hands on my arm. He held on to me tight and said low and soft, "Young boss, young boss," he kept repeating. But I never forget that first hour of knowing I was blind. I was so frightened that it was so hard for me to breathe. It was as if I'd been put inside something and it was all dark and I couldn't get out. I remember at one point my fear turned to anger. Anger at Timothy for not letting me stay in the water with my mother. Then anger at her because we were on the raft. And I began hitting him, and I remember him saying, "If that make you feel better, go ahead." And after a while I felt very tired, and I fell back on the hot boards.